In this video, I'm going to explain how you can build a property portfolio using 5 key building blocks. We're going to be starting at the foundation with the most basic level and getting more detailed as we go. So if you're ready to start creating a property portfolio that gives you choices, let's dive right in. Now, at the base of our pyramid, we have level 1, which is laying the foundations for a quality property portfolio. To lay good foundations, you need to know where this property portfolio is heading. So you need to set some goals. Now, Emily and I set some different goals when we started with our portfolio. We set some realistic goals and we set some stretch targets of where we wanted to get in terms of our asset base and our passive income. Those are the 2 key areas I would suggest you start with. What is the asset base, or the size of the portfolio that you want to achieve? And what is the passive income? Now, some people argue you should just worry about your net worth and your asset base. Don't worry about the cash flows. And on the flip side, others will say just focus on the cash flows and what that number is and forget about the size of your portfolio. I think you should start with both. Laying the foundation means knowing where you're heading in terms of the size and what cash flows are being spitted out of your portfolio. So for Emily and I, we started with some basic targets. We wanted to achieve a $2.5 million portfolio with $50,000 worth of cash flow each year. That was our base targets. Now, for each of those, we then set some larger targets. So we wanted a $3.5 million portfolio and $100,000 of passive income. And then a stretch target was $5 million of property and $150,000 of passive income. So we've been lucky enough to create a property portfolio that generates over 6 figures in terms of its income, as well as over a $5.5 million asset base at this point in time. Now, we're setting further goals, so we're looking to go to a $10 million portfolio with maybe $250,000 of passive income. So grab a pen and paper or pull out the Notes app on your phone and jot down those goals. Some other key points when it comes to laying your foundation is understanding how banks and credit systems work. Your credit score is somewhat important, but even more important is your access to capital or access to debt from Australia's banks. Now, let me give you the quick version of the banks. There's 4 big banks at the top, there's about 25 mid-tier banks in the middle, and there's hundreds of banks that would fall into that 2nd and 3rd tier here in Australia. Most people, sometimes they'll have a chat with ANZ or Westpac and get stuck and go, oh, well, I guess property's not for me. But if you're getting stuck, maybe have a look at 2nd and 3rd tier banks. And that's where finding an investment-savvy mortgage broker can be massive in terms of your property journey. So look at what you can borrow. I would generally suggest start with those top banks first, and then as you cap out on serviceability with each of those banks, then look at the other options down the track. For buying your property portfolio, you need to understand your leverage and your serviceability. So I'm doing this at the moment and looking at what I can do from here. And Emily and I are going to have roughly, say, a $3 million borrowing capacity for our next potential purchases. So go have a chat with your broker and your bank and work out what your maximum is. You don't have to necessarily spend that money. I don't have to go out and spend $3 million. But if I know what my maximum borrowing capacity is, I can work out how many properties I can buy within that capacity or what I need to do to continue growing that borrowing capacity. The final key element of laying that foundation is making sure you save the deposit. Sounds super basic, but you need to save. You need to earn more, spend less, create a disparity, and use those savings as a deposit towards your first property. Now, if you already have property, maybe you should look at equity harvesting, which is where you pull out some more debt against the assets you currently own, and then go and use that money to buy future investments. So make sure you have the capital available to you, whether it's through savings or whether it's through equity, to go out there and make acquisitions. Now we're moving on to level 2 in terms of your property journey. This is selecting the right asset straight away. If you buy the wrong first property, you're not going to set yourself up for success. Now, the way I look at buying property for myself and most clients is generally we want to start with capital growth first and cash flow second. And the reason is capital growth is where you're going to create net worth and create value and create equity, which you can leverage and use those funds to continue building the asset base. If you focus on cash flow first, that might actually hamper you building out the portfolio. It is going to depend on your day job income. If you're a high income earner, generally those capital growth heavy properties are going to suit you best. But if you're a lower income earner and you can't break into those higher priced properties, say at $800 to $1 million plus here in Brisbane, and you can only afford a $500 to $700K property or a $300 to $500K property, you need to look at your own capacity and your own journey. And in those circumstances, it may make sense to buy a more capital growth cash flow balanced property instead. So look at your personal situation and make sure you make the best first investment decision that you can, whether it's your own home or an investment, because that property is going to set you up for success in the future. Going back to my situation and what Emily and I did with our first property, we bought a property that was blue chip with very strong capital growth, and we manufactured value through renovations. We got our hands dirty. We painted the walls, we sanded some floors a little bit, even though we weren't very successful at that. We added a new kitchen and bathrooms. We created value. The other thing that we did was house hack. So we rented out some of those rooms to create additional income to help us service the mortgage and save our money faster to look at reinvesting and buying some more assets. So look at your own situation. It's absolutely critical in building this property portfolio that you get level 2 right, because that first acquisition is going to set you up for success. Now, level 3 is financing your property portfolio. What happens at this level is you need to really expand the detail and ways to create value in your asset base and also manage the expenses. Now we're looking at fixed versus variable rates. If you'd known a few years ago to jump onto a fixed rate for 2% interest rates for a 4-year period of time, you would be tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands ahead of someone else who didn't fix back at that period of time when the RBA was giving insanely low rates to the banks. On the flip side, variable rates can give you some flexibility. So using variable rates can allow you to have 100% offset accounts. They can allow you to switch banks rapidly. So you need to understand when to use fixed rates and when to use variable rates. In my own portfolio, I'm rolling off some of those lower fixed rates. I fixed for a 2-year period. Now, I would have loved to have fixed for a 3 or a 4-year period, to be perfectly honest with you. But at that point in time, I was looking at a 2-year window. If I jumped to a 3-year rate, it was a 0.5 or 0.6% higher. And I knew that Emily and I were continually refinancing in our property portfolio journey. The reason we're always refinancing is we're wanting to move the debt away from bad debt into good debt. So we're trying to debt recycle out of our own home. And the other thing we're always trying to do is manage our liquidity. We want to make sure we have as much funds in our pocket as possible, sitting in offset accounts, ready to make asset acquisitions when the timing is right. If you don't have that liquidity and you don't have access to your own funds and you're paying down the debt by doing P&I on everything, that might reduce your liquidity and not enable you to access opportunities if you didn't have the funds available. Now, you should also maximize all of the available funds and grants and concessions during your financing journey. Now, for Emily and I, this was using the First Home Super Saver scheme. There's federal grants out there if you do new builds or stamp duty concessions. Look at all of the things available to you throughout your financing journey. At a snapshot, I would generally look to get a stamp duty concession if I'm buying my first home, if that's possible. I would also look at using the First Home Super Saver scheme to save on some taxes. I'd also look at using the lender's mortgage insurance discount with the Australian government. So those would be some key things to look into. The other key thing is always having pre-approvals in place before you go out and buy in the market. Getting yourself finance ready is critical to giving yourself an advantage when you're negotiating on a property. If you're going down to an auction or you're going to make a serious offer on a property, sometimes it will enable you to remove a finance clause if you're very confident in your finances and your broker and bank delivering on that deal. So it can give you an edge when it comes to negotiating, and it can also get yourself ready so you can go out there and start looking for the right property for yourself. All right, you've laid the foundation, you've acquired your first asset, you've leveled up in terms of your understanding of financing. Now let's get into some more advanced property strategies. So it's time to expand your property portfolio. This means going from your first asset to your second, to your third, to your fourth, and so on from there. It's not about the number of properties you have. It's about the value created in terms of your asset base and the cash flows that are coming off of that property portfolio. Emily and I have 3 properties in our portfolio now, but it's a unit block with 5 doors. It's a house that generates significant income and our own home that's, again, creating value. And then we're looking to buy some more assets with maybe more doors to increase the cash flow side of our property portfolio. You don't need 30, 40 properties. Most Aussies are going to need somewhere between 2 to 6 properties to get towards their retirement. So this is where you need to leverage your equity, as we spoke about earlier, look at the pre-approvals, and then go out and acquire the assets you need. For our journey, we went for growth first. So we went for properties 1, 2, and 3, all as capital growth focused. And that's where we bought these properties here in Southeast Queensland. Then once we'd acquired these properties and added value to them, and the market had done some capital growth, we were able to refinance $250,000 each in additional debt against each of these properties. That gave us roughly $750,000 of cash at the age of 27 from CBA to go out and buy our unit block in Coffs Harbour. Now that might sound absolutely crazy to you that we were able to do that, but the banks don't have a problem with this. It's a business transaction. So when you're getting more advanced with these property purchases and your property strategy, you need to take that business mindset. I'm acquiring these assets for long-term value creation. I'm balancing my cash flows. I'm looking at the equity that I can pull out, how much money I have in my offset accounts, having my insurances all in place. You need to run it like a business at this point in time. You also might want to consider some more diversification. So for Emily and I, we looked and we bought outside of Southeast Queensland when we made our fourth property purchase. Instead of continuing to acquire all of our assets here in Brisbane, even though Brisbane has had some great growth, we went and purchased a property in Coffs Harbour because we liked that regional market. It had over 100,000 people. It had a diverse economy. We liked the area. We liked the location of the unit block. And we saw that it had some strong potential for us to add value and increase the rents and hold that asset for a 20-year period. And that was going to be part of our retirement portfolio. So look at diversification, how you can buy in multiple states, look at the land taxes, and customize and create your own portfolio to suit your situation. You've reached the pinnacle, you've reached the top of the pyramid, and you are now becoming a property pro. This is where we move into the optimization phase. All those 4 layers are super important in building up and creating that property portfolio. But at the very top, the cherry on the cake, it's optimizing if you want to become a pro. Optimizing means negotiating on those little interest rates to save yourself $5,000 to $10,000 here. Squeezing the insurance broker to get yourself the best numbers and the adequate coverage on your asset base. Going to your property managers and saying, hey, if I put 2 or 3 properties with you, can you give me a 6.5% or a 7% management rate rather than paying 8 or 9%? So now we're moving into that pro phase where you need to optimize everything. Now, you might think that this is a little bit boring, optimization, maintenance, management, but they're so crucial to getting your property portfolio right. The really exciting stuff with property is buying the assets, making that acquisition, and growing your asset base. But once you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus properties in your portfolio, you need then the better management systems and the maintenance in place to ensure everything is running smoothly. You also want to keep your finger on the pulse. So I'm sure lots of people who watch my videos might have acquired the assets they need, but they still want to keep up to date with the market and plan their next purchase. I'm quite like that. I'm constantly listening to podcasts, reading books, articles, keeping up to date with what's happening in the market. Now, myself and my team are obviously buying on the ground and looking at lots of data, both quantitative and qualitative, to make our decisions with clients to find the right property for their specific buying brief. So it's important to keep your ear to the ground in case you're wanting to change your strategies a little bit, realign, maybe sell down some assets and invest elsewhere. I always like to say you should hold things loosely. If your investing philosophy changes over time, that's okay. You set a plan originally, and Emily and I did that. We wanted to build a $2.5 to $3 million portfolio, and then that grew into a $5 million plus portfolio. And now we're looking at $10 million. And for us to do that, we had to change and adapt over time. You should also explore some different exit strategies. Now you're at the top, you're becoming a pro, you need to look at consolidating, refinancing, and building out your cash flows further. Emily and I are in that phase, or I think we are at this point in time, with what we're doing in our portfolio. So we just recently sold one of our investments here in Brisbane for $963,000. And if you want to see me break down all of the numbers, I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video. But for us, selling that asset was about reducing some of the debt in our portfolio, getting the cash that was left over and putting that in our offset accounts, and potentially looking at refinancing the rest of our entire portfolio to build out our asset base further. We may make a motel purchase or an Airbnb purchase, or we might look at a unit block. We've got lots of different assets that we're looking at, and we're not tied to one strategy or another at this point in time. It's about finding the next asset that suits Emily and I in our journey because we're moving to a cash flow phase of our portfolio. So that's it. You've covered the 5 levels. You've laid the foundation. You've chosen to buy your first property. You've upped your finance game. You've continued to build your property portfolio, and now you've optimized at the top. Now, if part of your portfolio plan is to secure a property, whether it's your own home or an investment here in the Southeast Queensland market, then head over to purposeproperty.com.au. We can sit down, have a chat, break down the levels in your property portfolio and where you are heading. And then we'll leave some time at the end for some questions. So head over to purposeproperty.com.au if you want to sit down and have a chat with myself. And as a thank you for sticking around to the end of this video, you can also download a free property investment calculator. You can click this video over here to see the walkthrough of it. Yeah, baby. Just shooting a video.
Yeah.
You want to come in?
Yeah.
Okay.
There.
Oh, you want a lolly?
Yeah.